Hey, everybody. Do you like graphs? If you said no, then you just go out. I make graphs about religion. That's my job. Who would have thought, right? Not me, but that's what the world wants, so that's what we're going to get. The book, The Nuns, where they came from, who they are, and where they're going, from Fortress Press. That's your people, come on now. A new edition of The Nuns is coming out in May. So Nuns, second edition coming out in May with more graphs. And a few more words, but more graphs. That's really the most important part. So, the book started, as all good academic projects start, with a tweet. That's a joke because most academics don't use Twitter. Okay? But I do. And so, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was a little-known academic from a backwater institution in Illinois. Didn't go to a very good PhD program. No one knew much about me. And then I tweeted that graph. By the way, you should have handouts from this. Have I got the handouts? So you can see this. And there you go. Now we're talking. Okay, good. That tweet, in the introduction to the book, I talk about how I tweeted that graph out. And I went and... my kids were little at the time, like 5 and 3, and I started giving them a bath, and I ran back downstairs and made more graph, and ran back upstairs and got them out of the bathtub, and then ran back downstairs and hit tweet, and then ran back upstairs and got them out of the bath, dried them off, got their jammies on, read them a story, put them to bed, and I looked down at my phone, I had like 35 retweets. And I was like, well, that's not typical. And I woke up the next morning and I had about 100 retweets. And then I checked again, and and I had another 100, another 100, another 100, another 100. And it got retweeted over 1,000 times. And then all of a sudden, a guy who had never spoken to the media before was being contacted by CNN and the New York Post and the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Daily Mail and you name it. And I was on C-SPAN on Easter Sunday morning of 2019 at 6 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I was like, well, no one's listening to this right now. And that really started my career as more of a public academic. The people have spoken, and the people wanted more information about the non-religious people in America. And so when Fortress approached me about writing a book about a year later, I remembered that old Wayne Gretzky quote, "You don't go where the puck is, you go where the puck's going." And they wanted to learn about the nuns. Let's give the people what they want. And that's where the idea of the book came from, is that everyone seemed interested in this topic. Not even religious people, not even non-religious people, like even people who didn't care about religion cared about this topic for whatever reason. So that's what the book really was all about. Now, that graph is this graph, just bigger. I'll break down a couple of the big trends I want to point out here. This data comes from the General Social Survey, which is the gold standard of social science. It's been around since 1972. It's a survey that's been done face-to-face every year or two since 1972. Until the pandemic hit, then it ruined everything, which I talk more about in Nuns version 2. But this is American religion. We divide American religion into 7 categories. Evangelicals, mainline Protestants, which is the ELCA is mainline Protestant, okay? There are 7 sisters of the mainline, and you all are one of them. And I'm an American Baptist. We are one of the other sisters of the mainline. Black Protestants, we divide them into their own category, which are like AME and churches like that. And then Catholics, Jews, other faith groups, and nuns. No religion. And when I use the word nun, I don't mean Catholic nuns. I mean N-O-N-E-S. Okay? So just a clarification, it's always, unless I tell you otherwise, it's N-O-N-E-S. Okay? So, a couple things. First, evangelicals, 1972 to 2018. I talk about this in 20 Myths a little bit. The idea is that evangelicals are in decline. 17% of Americans were evangelicals in 1972. Now it's 21% or so, 22%. In 2018, there are as many evangelicals in America today as there were in 1993. 75 million or so evangelicals. Evangelicals are not in decline. The share of Americans who self-identify as evangelical is now 34%, the highest it's ever been. Evangelicalism is not going away, okay? And actually, in some ways, I think evangelicals are more powerful today than they were at any point in American history in terms of culture and society and politics and things like that. So, the idea of religions declining is sort of not true. It's a nuanced conversation. Some religions declining and some religions doing relatively okay. And evangelicals are in the relatively okay category. This is us. Mainline Protestant Christianity in the 1950s. I've seen reports, I've not been able to verify this, but I've seen reports in other journals that half of all Americans were mainline Protestant in the 1950s. Okay? Earliest data I have shows them being about 31% of Americans in the mid-1970s, about 1975, 1976, 31%. Evangelicals never have gotten that large, by the way, 31%. And now mainline Protestant Christianity is about 10% of America, and very quickly going to be 5% of America, probably the next 10 or 20 years, depending on death rates, to be completely honest with you. The average mainline Protestant now is in their early 60s, which I don't want to be the Grim Reaper here, which means in 20 years, half of mainline Protestants are going to be dead, unless they're replaced by a lot of younger mainline Protestants. And you can look at the denominational statistics and see it. ELCA, UCC, UMC, ABC USA, Disciples of Christ, they're all at least down by 30% from the 1990s. Okay, and that's official denominational records, which you all know how well those are kept. It's a lagging indicator, right? We know that's actually worse than what the numbers show. So mainline Protestants are in trouble. There's no doubt about that. Catholics, I'll give you two numbers here, 27% to 23%. And when I give this talk to Catholics, I go, yes! And then I'm going to tell you something else. In the 1970s, about half of Catholics went to Mass every Sunday, and now about 20% of Catholics go to Mass every Sunday. So the top number looks good. Underneath the surface, there's a lot of fissures and cracks and fading. I think what's happening is people are still culturally Catholic, but not committed Catholics. They actually don't go to Mass. They're not part of a parish. They don't really involve themselves in Catholic life, except they say they're Catholic because their mom or dad are Italian or Irish, let's say. Okay, so that number kind of belies an erosion underneath the surface. And the Catholic Church is losing people in the pews every single Sunday. And then here's the nuns. In 1972, about 1 in 20 Americans were nuns. N-O-N-E-S, 1 in 20. There was a great paper written in 1968 by a sociologist from the University of Washington calling them the neglected category. No one was doing any work on the nuns in 1968. And you know why? Because there weren't that many of them, right? Statistically, you can't do a whole lot with a group that's 5% of the population because you can't cut it by much more than gender. Otherwise, you get down to like 12 people. And that you can't do that, right? So for a long time, sociology sort of ignored the non-religious, not because they didn't care about the non-religious, it's just because they couldn't do anything with them statistically, okay? So they bopped along from 5%, and by 1990, they had just skyrocketed to 7%, which is actually inside the margin. So actually, we can't say statistically they grew at all between 1972 and 1990, 5% to 7%. And then I call this hockey stick growth. Just flat, 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 boom, and took off. And by 1991, the rocket had taken off. By 1996, they had gone from 7% to 12%. By 2006, they were 16%. By 2012, they were 20%. By 2018, they are 24% of the population. And I actually think that's an undercount. I actually think it's higher than that. I think the right number, the number that Pew Research Center uses, is about 30%. Okay? That's the number of, like, a media person calls me and goes, what percentage of Americans are nuns? I go, about 30%. I think that's the most statistically accurate number that we can get to, is about 30%. Because it's really hard to measure religion for a whole bunch of reasons. And so we can't get one answer, we've got to get multiple answers. And this is what those multiple answers look like. This is every major survey I can find that tracks religious change over time. We've got the Cooperative Election Study, which I'm going to use a lot of today. There's the Pew Research Center, which is in the purple. You can't see purple when you're black and white, but you know what I mean. The Nationscape survey is below that. Public Religion Research Institute is the blue, and the GSS is what I just showed you in the orange, and then Gallup. Gallup has the nuns at 21%. The cooperative election study has them at 37%. So somewhere in there is the right answer. I think it's probably around 28, 29, 30%. I think that's the best we have at understanding this phenomenon is that 28, 29, 30% number. So, why is this happening? My favorite thing is whenever the media calls me up and goes, so Dr. Burge, tell me why the nuns are rising so fast, and they want to write like a 400-word article about this. I want someone to like hang up the phone, like, no, I can't do this. This is like social science malpractice for me to like, make this into like a little tight little narrative kind of thing, because it doesn't work that way. Social science is not simple. Nothing is simple. Anytime, like those little, like on the internet, that has little boxes about like 3 simple tricks to do this. There are no simple tricks here. Okay, there's not one simple thing I can tell you, because the problem with the world is it's incredibly complicated. Okay? Is it this? Probably. Is it that? Probably. Is it, how much of this? No idea. How much of that? Not a clue. Sociologically, we can do things, we can do models, we can do, data, but there's so much unexplained about the world that we can't see in the data. So what I'm going to do today is kind of take you through some of the greatest hits, the ones I think are probably the most relevant to the discussion. In the book, I think I give 8 or 9 possibilities, and here I'm only going to talk about half of those. So hey, buy the book. Support the ELCA by buying the book, especially the new one that comes out, because it's going to be even better than the prior version. So, secularization. Anybody's ever taken a sociology religion class? You probably heard a whole week on secularization. I think more seminaries should hire sociologists. I'll roll that grenade in the room and let you guys deal with that. Okay? Because we have a lot to say about religion and where it comes from. Secularization is the idea that as a society becomes more educated and economically prosperous, it becomes less religious. Okay? Weber says that education and income, SES, are negatively related to religiosity. Religion is for poor, uneducated people. And once you get education and once you get income, you don't need religion any longer. Okay? And you can think about it like this. Imagine you live in 1,000 years before Christ and somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, and you planted a really nice crop that year, and it doesn't rain, and your crop dies, and you die, or your family dies. Why did it not rain? Because God said no rain. That's the answer. Because you don't have, you don't understand hydrology and atmospheric science and climatology and all that stuff. So everything that's unexplainable is explained by a cosmic force, a supernatural force in your life. Max Weber called that, I'm not German. Thank you. We translate it in English as disenchantment, but I found this other translation that I think is even better, demagication. So what does education do? It demagicates your life, right? So why did it not rain? Well, because we're in a dry cycle right now. Climatologists will, got El Nino and all that kind of stuff. We're in a larger cosmic, it's a bigger thing going on, not just in our region, but the entire world. Or why did my son cough twice and die? Not because he had an evil spirit, because he got tuberculosis. It demagicates our life. It makes things more rational, more scientific, more humanistic. And so what does education do in Weber's worldview? It demagicates the world. We know why things happen, because human beings are on a quest for meaning. We love to explain things. We hate uncertainty. And education replaces God, and therefore we don't need that anymore. We don't need the God is punishing us thing anymore. Remember Achan's sin in the Old Testament with Joshua? They went to battle and they lost and they couldn't figure out why. And so what do? They go to each tribe and each clan and each family, and they find out that one guy had stolen the spoils of war. And what do? They take him and his entire family out to the edge of the camp and they kill all of them. Because why did they lose? Because Achan sinned. Not because they were bad strategists, but because Achan sinned. See how that works? You know what that also does, by the way? Social control. You think anybody else is going to steal the spoils of war after that? Never. And Weber would go, yeah, but you don't need that. You need science. Right? You lost because of science, not because of God. So, Karl Marx. I'm going to walk out now. I just get so worried someone's going to like record me and put me up on one of those conservative. Look at this guy talking about Karl Marx in church. Karl Marx said, most famously, his most famous quote about religion is, it is the... There you go. It's the opium of the masses, right? It is... He said, religion's the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of the heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. What is religion used as? As a tool of control. It told slaves in the South that you should work hard. Slaves work as to your masters, as to the Lord, and not unto men. Right? It told factory workers during the Industrial Revolution, just work hard because God wants you to work hard. It kept people in their own poverty, and basically rich people used religion as a tool to keep poor people down and enslave people down. So if you get educated, you get class consciousness, and you realize what the rich people are doing to you, and you throw that off. Well, look at Europe. 44% of Polish people attend church every week. That's way higher than America. Poland's the weirdest country on earth. They're post-communist, right? They were a communist country which tried to root out religion entirely, and yet they're one of the most religious countries on earth right now. It's fascinating because all their neighbors are not religious at all. But beyond that, 44% in Poland, 34% in Slovakia, Cyprus, Ireland, and Italy are about where we are, about 25%. Okay, that's about us. But now go down to other sort of bigger European countries. Belgium, 9%. Lithuania, 8%. France, 8%. Sweden, 5%. Finland, Norway, 4%. Estonia, 3%. Denmark, 3%. You know what Weber would do? He'd look at that graph and go, exactly. Look what happened. You got education there in Western Europe, and you don't need God anymore. We demagicated society in Western Europe. And there's this great scatter plot. So on the x-axis, this is GDP per capita, which is a measure of economic prosperity. On the vertical axis, it's the share of the people in that country saying religion is very important to them. Hey, I'm in statistics class right now. That's a negative correlation, everybody. You see how the line goes down? You notice any outliers there? God bless America. We're a bunch of weirdos. That's also why if you study American religion, it does not apply to any other country on earth. We're just so different than any, where we came, a lot of us came from Western Europe. We're not like that at all. But there's a couple on the bottom too, by the way. Look at China. They should be a lot more religious than what they are. Why? Because communism basically pushed that out. If America were on the trend line, about 10% of Americans would say religion is very important. Instead, it's over 50% of Americans say religion is very important. It's crazy, right? We are way more religious. So the question really is not, it's why are we so weird? That's the question. How did we stand out like that? So, maybe it's education, but maybe it's not, Social desirability bias. You guys know what that is? It's the idea that people lie. I like how social science creates fancy words for like really basic ideas. And social desirability bias is a really fancy word saying that we are lied to when we take surveys. When we give surveys, we're lied to all the time. Okay? Imagine you're walking through a mall. You guys remember those? They had stores there. Okay. You're walking through a mall and someone grabs you and goes, "Do you want to take a survey?" "No." "I'll give you $20. "Okay." Take you in a back room. Start asking you questions. What's your age, your gender, your race, basic stuff. And then they look at you and go, "How about this? Do you masturbate? Are black people lazy? Have you ever cheated on your spouse? How about drugs? Do you do drugs? How many drugs? What kind of drugs? Are you on drugs right now? Should a woman be president?" You know what's going to happen when you ask people those questions? They're going to lie. A lot. Because the socially desirable answer is, no, I don't do drugs. No, I don't cheat on my wife. No, I think that, this, that, and the other thing. That is the socially desirable answer. Okay? And you know what the number one category for people to lie about is on surveys? Religion. And we know this for a fact. We know this for a fact. So, the very basic question, how often you go to church? Really, it's been asked on every survey for all of humankind. So, this great team of researchers in the late 1980s, early 1990s said, let's just figure out if people lie about that question or not. So, they went to a little county in Ohio called Ashtabula County. I said it right, by the way. First 5 times I did this, I did it wrong, and you should have heard the backlash. It's Ashtabula, not Ashtabula County, Ashtabula County. I learned my lesson, which is a very sort of middle of the road Midwestern county. Okay, not too big, not too small, kind of in rural Ohio. And what they did was they did a survey, and they asked people, how often do you go to church? On the survey, 36% of people said they attended church every week. And then they said, well, let's just check. So they had grad assistants. God bless grad assistants. They have to do the worst jobs on earth, which is go through the yellow pages and find every church in Ashtabula County, Ohio, and call the pastor and ask them the question, how many people did you have in church last Sunday? And it wasn't a big county, so, a couple 125 churches or so. Now, some churches didn't respond, so, what they did, they drove the parking lots of the church the next Sunday and counted cars and used that, created a formula like 1 car is 1.5 people, you could presuppose, and then do a little math and added it all together, and what they found out was that only about 20% of people actually attended church in Ashtabula County, Ohio on an average Sunday. So half the people say they go to church lie about it. So what does that mean for us? It might mean there were a whole heck of a lot more nuns in America 30 years ago than what we could pick up on surveys. They just lied about it. So maybe we've always been at this level, or close to this level, and we just could not measure it. Does that make you feel better? We've always had this many nuns. You just didn't know. What's the first step in 12-step recovery? Admitting you have a problem. And maybe our survey methods are revealing that problem now for the first time. The problem is, here's what's really hard about this, a really pernicious problem. I can't go back and ask the people who took the survey 20 years ago, hey, when you took that survey about how often you attended church, did you lie about it? And are you lying now about not lying about it? Right? It's impossible to sort this out methodologically. Now, there's other ways to do it now, but we can't go back in time and do that. It's just not possible. So we're doing surveys online now. Almost all surveys are done online. We actually think we're getting a lot closer to the real answers now because people are willing to be honest with a web browser when they're not willing to be honest looking another human being in the eye. So I think we're a lot closer to the real number now than we were even 10 or 15 years ago. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so this is going to be fun. Politics and religion. Okay. Culture war. You guys have heard the culture war theory, right? Abortion, gay marriage, that kind of stuff drove people to kind of divide themselves into camps. That theory is actually not really accepted by that many folks who do what I do anymore. It's considered to be one of the reasons we saw this God gap form, but not the only reason we saw the God gap form. So, you guys know who Randall Balmer is? He's somewhere up north, New England. He wrote a book that was based on this article for Politico called The Real Origins of the Religious Right, where he talks about Holmes County, Mississippi. After Brown versus Board, every school district in America had to desegregate. It took 15 years for some districts in the South to actually desegregate. They actually fought tooth and nail to not desegregate for as long as they could. In Holmes County, Mississippi, they fought for 15 years. When they actually had to desegregate, the next day, they started a private Christian school in Holmes County, Mississippi. And 2 years later, not a single white kid went to the public school in Holmes County, Mississippi. They went to all the private white Christian school. And the IRS stepped in and said, we're going to revoke your tax-exempt status because we know what you're really doing here. You're really sidestepping Brown versus Board. And what Balmer says is that the religious right really grew up around racism. And they talked about how it was, the religious right used the religious freedom argument. Right? They said it's our religious freedom to have only white kids in our school. Bob Jones University was also swept up in this too, by the way. Bob Jones University would not allow black students to enroll, and even up until about 20 years ago, it was illegal on Bob Jones campus for interracial dating to happen. 20 years ago! Not 200 years ago or 50 years ago, 20 years ago. So Balmer says it's about racism. That's where the religious right finds its fervor is in racism. There's also other theories. There's this really great book by Kevin Cruz called One Nation Under God, How Corporate America Created Christian America. And he says that where the religious right really got its zeal was from the rich people, the oil magnates, and the robber barons of the 1920s and 30s. Billy Graham. You know how Billy Graham got famous? William Randolph Hearst ran almost the most newspapers in America, and he really liked Graham, so he told all his reporters to puff Graham in their newspapers to give him some good publicity. And you know what Graham never did? Spoke against capitalism. Never. Because he was kind of in bed with big business. And so these big business owners, they actually had things like sermon writing contests. This is in the 1950s. They would do a contest. If you wrote the best sermon extolling the virtues of capitalism, you would win an award. And they got thousands of entries. Only a couple of awards, but I don't know. I'm a pastor. If I write a sermon, I'm not throwing it away. I'm going to use it. So you see what's happening here, right? They basically paid pastors to write about capitalism to their congregations. And so what Cruz makes this argument is really it was about rich business owners inculcating capitalism to the average rank and file Protestant, which made them grab onto low taxes, low regulation, which led them to gravitate towards the Republican Party, right? And that created this bifurcation. And there's Christian nationalism. I'm sure this crowd's heard about Christian nationalism a little bit every once in a while, right? There's a lot of, this is not my area. Other people do this a lot better than I do, but I'll just mention that it's a thing. It exists. It's probably not growing, by the way. Most recent data we have says it's not growing. It's actually receding in some ways, probably because Christianity is receding. Nationalism is on the rise, not just here, but everywhere. Now, do we see it in the data? Oh my gosh, yes. Okay? I think this is one of the, and sociologists have been pointing this out for 20 years now. Houghton Fisher wrote a great piece in 2002 where they said, why are people leaving church? Because of politics. Over 50% of liberals today identify as nuns. 50 identify as nuns. Amongst moderates, it's 25%. Amongst conservatives, it's 12%. It's stair-step down perfectly. Like, you'd think I would cook the books to make it look like this. I did not. This is what the data tells us. People who are liberal are much more likely to be nuns today. Over half of white Democrats today are nuns. Over half of white Democrats, that's in the new book, over half of white Democrats today are nuns. It's really, the combination is really white plus Democrat equals non-religion. People of color who are Democrats don't leave religion at nearly the same rate as white people who are Democrats. It's become crystallized in the minds of the average person. To be a Democrat is to be a nun, especially if you're white. To be a Republican is to be a conservative person, typically a Christian. And that's only getting worse now, this God gap we call the pew gap. And that's driving people out of churches because in a lot of parts of America, you cannot be a Democrat and feel welcome in any church in that community. You guys live in a place where there are liberal Protestant traditions. In my community, my county of 35,000, almost 40,000 people, there are a total of 4 mainline Protestant churches left. Mine has 12 people. The Episcopals don't even meet anymore. The ELCA and the PCUSA joined together to form one church because they couldn't afford 2 separate buildings, and now they're going to be gone in the next 10 or 15 years. And the United Methodists have about 300 people, but they're going to have a big vote over gay marriage in the next 6 or 8 months, and they're going to split. There's one church in my entire community of 40,000 people, in my county, that would do a same-sex marriage. One. There's no room for moderate or liberal Protestant religion, and the Catholic Church is going to the right too. So a lot of young white people who are left-leaning go, well, nothing here for me. No Christianity for me here. If you're conservative, there's a lot of Christianity for you, but not for me. And they're leaving because of that. I love this. So this is a cool graph where we ask people to put the Democrats on a scale from 1 to 7. 1 meaning very liberal and 7 meaning very conservative. We ask them to put the Republicans on that scale, the Democrats on that scale, and themselves on that scale. I love that because then it tells us like how we see the parties moving around and stuff. Atheists, is that on your slides? Dang it. Oh, sorry guys. I'll just point to it then, cool. So, Here's what's interesting. Atheists see the Democrats becoming more moderate over time and seeing themselves become more liberal. They're the only religious tradition in America today that thinks they've moved to the left of the Democratic Party. But look where white evangelicals see themselves. Right on top of the Republican Party. And you know what's interesting? Atheists put the Republicans about as far out as you can get here. White evangelicals put the Democrats about as far out as you can on the other side. So you're perceiving the other side as being extreme, and you're the moderate, middle of the road kind of person. And that's what we do, right? We find the worst version of the other party and then hate that version of it. We used to have tons of data that says, if you ask people, what percentage, you ask Republicans, what percentage of Democrats are atheists? They say like 35%. You know what it is? About 10. We mischaracterize the other side and then hate that version of the other side. We're doing more and more of that. So other theories, quick. The internet. How much time do I have? Oh, plenty of time. The internet. I love this theory. Can't test it. We got the internet too fast. That was our problem. We should have randomly selected people to get the internet for 5 years and no one else. That would have been great. Because then I could have a control group and a treatment group. I got none of that because we went from nobody having the internet to everybody having it 5 years later. That's not good from a social science perspective. Bowling Alone. You guys ever heard of this book before? Bob Putnam. The Collapse and Revival of American Community. The idea of the book comes from the idea that we used to bowl in bowling leagues and we don't anymore. We bowl alone now. We also, what's funny is he blames this. This book came out in 1993. He blames it all on cable television, which seems so quaint now, doesn't it? It's like, oh, that's cute. I say like the 2022 version would be called tweeting alone or Facebooking alone or Instagramming alone or Netflixing alone or, TikToking alone. Because now we've atomized more because of what's happened with, we can entertain ourselves at home now. It used to be you had to go hang out with people to be entertained. Now you don't have to. And that's made us less willing to join everything. Not just church, everything. You don't believe me? Look how many Moose Lodges and Lions Clubs and VFWs and American Legions are closing down across this country every single year. Look at union membership, which is political, but also people are not joining unions either because they're just anti-joining stuff. That's where we are. So that's part of trust. Can't not talk about trust, right? Catholic Church scandal, Southern Baptist Convention scandal. Joel Osteen had like $50,000 in cash in a toilet in his church at one point. You guys heard that story? A plumber was working on the church, Joel Osteen's church in Houston, Texas, and found like $50,000 in cash stored behind a toilet. No one knows where it came from. Wild story. People read that and go, of course. That's how it works. The evolution of the family, we cannot not talk about the skyrocketing number of kids born to single parents, the collapse of marriage in this country, especially by the way, this crowd's probably not going to want to hear this, but Democrats are bad at this stuff. They don't have kids. They don't get married, okay? 50% of Democrats are not married on their 32nd birthday. Half of Democrats are not married by their 32nd birthday. It's 27 years old for Republicans. Democrats are having fewer children than Republicans are. They're not having kids. They're not getting married. And that's what, we know those are the factors that lead people back into church. Just getting married, having kids. Keeps them on the straight and narrow. Child-free movement, divorce. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Look at the internet. I mean, boom. It went from nothing to everything like that. And if you look at the rise of the nuns, it doesn't go up that fast. So you can't track those two things together. It just doesn't work that way. So, okay, do I have time for that? I don't. Oh, that's share of Americans are married. Hold on. Okay, here we go. This is my longer form. Extra graphs. You can never have too many graphs. I made 1,250 graphs last year, everybody. Some people bake bread. Some people knit. I make graphs. It's free, There's a little computer, hit a little button, boom, 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 graph comes out. Magic. And people like them. I don't know. Okay, so demographics of disaffiliation. Age, race, gender, education, all kinds of good stuff. Okay? I'll have my clicker not clicking. Okay, here we go. If you were in my workshop earlier, you saw this graph. I don't like generations, but here we go. Is that in the power? Did I give you look at that. I'm right on track. Oh, it's so good. I feel prepared now. Silent generation, people born 1925 to 1945, 71% of them identify as Protestant or Catholic, 49% Protestant, 22% Catholic, and about 18% say they're nuns. Atheist, agnostic, nothing in particular are nuns. We'll talk about those in a second. So 18% nuns, 72%, 71% Protestants or Catholics. Okay? But now, look at Generation Z. Generation Z is 22% Protestant and 15% Catholic. That's 37%. Nothing in particulars are 32%. Atheist agnostics are 13%. 45% nuns. 37% Protestants or Catholics. First generation in American history where the nuns clearly outnumber the Protestants or the Catholics. And every day in America, you know what happens? People at the top of that graph die. And every day in America, you know what happens? People on the bottom of that graph become adults. It's called generational replacement. You know how the church went away? Because people die and people are born every day. People leave, that's part of it, but people just die and are replaced by people who are much less religious than them. 71% is being replaced by 37% every day in this country. That is this wave just washing across America slowly, slowly, slowly. So, what does America look like? 34% of Americans are Protestants, and 23% are nothing in particular. 18% are Catholics. No one else is even close to that. Notice that? No one else is even in the double digits. My favorite is there's a show on television called The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Utah. 1% of Americans are Latter-day Saints. 1%. You know what the population of Salt Lake City is? 200,000. Tulsa, Oklahoma is twice the size of Salt Lake City. I don't see a Real Housewives of Tulsa on the horizon because we're drawn to weirdness, right? Peculiar faith. And let's be honest, Latter-day Saints are a peculiar faith. They're different. Like they have different culture and customs. But, the one thing I get asked, like, are Muslims on the march? Are Buddhists on the march? Are Hindus on the march? Like one chapter in 20 Myths says we're biased towards Christians. I'm not biased towards Christians. I'm biased towards big numbers. Think about it. I did a survey of 1,000 people. How many Mormons would I have in that survey of 1,000 people? 10. Can I do much with 10 people? I shouldn't. You guys get what I'm saying here? These are very small groups in American society. We're still a lot of Christians in this country. A lot of them. Okay? And will be for the foreseeable future, but that's declining like we just talked about. So, what do 18 to 22-year-olds look like? 1 in 3 18 to 22-year-olds today say they are nothing in particular. The plurality, the most common choice amongst college-age people today when they hear the religion question is go, I don't know. Meh. Right? They're not this, but they're not that either. That's the number one choice. I want to point something else out to you. 7% are atheists and 6% are agnostic. In the general public, it is basically the same amount. 6% are atheists and 5% are agnostic. Young people are not significantly more likely to be atheist or agnostic compared to the general public. They're more likely to be meh. Right? So this is not an atheist-agnostic thing. This is a meh thing. This is a non-religious thing. Okay? So, age. Look at that. You guys have that one? No, you don't have that one. It wouldn't print. What's your next one? Let me see your next one. Oh, that one's a good one. Hold on. I'll get there. Oh, right there. There it is. So, the question is, are people leaving religion, or are they being raised without religion, or what? That's an interesting question. This part of the new book, I really wanted to dig into that a little bit. So, what's nice about the General Social Survey is it asks people, what was your religion when you were growing up? And then ask them what their current religion is. Okay? So what I did was I broke this down into birth cohorts. These are 5-year bins that people were born. So these are people born between 1950 and 1954. Okay? 4% of people were raised without religion in that birth cohort. 4%. Almost none. 4%. By the time they hit their 25th birthday, 13% of them were nuns. Which means that, 9% of that had to happen. They had to leave religion. Everybody tracking with me right now? 4% raised none, 13% none by their 25th birthday, which means that 9% had to leave religion somewhere between, in that span. It goes 5%, 10%, 6%, 13%, 8%, 11%, 9% of people here were raised without religion, people born in the early 1970s, 15% were nuns by their 25th birthday. But look here, 11, 12, 12, 14, 14. So it continues just to kind of slowly ratchet up. But look at the other numbers. No religion by 25 years old. And people born in the early 1990s, 14% were raised with no religion, and a third of them had no religion by their 25th birthday. Which means that being raised without religion is a problem, but for every person that's raised without religion, another person leaves religion by their 25th birthday. So it's both, right? It's both being raised without religion, but it's also people are leaving religion too. 1/3 of these people, and they're doing it by their 25th birthday. I said this in the workshop. I have another book coming out this year called The Great Dechurching, and we asked people on a survey, what was the most religious you ever were in your life? Like 40% of people said before their 18th birthday was when they were the most religious in their life. So there's a lot of things happening like in youth that we're not thinking about very much. Like, 12 to 25 is a really key age, it feels like, in the data, where people are moving and shifting and changing and making their life course. Adults typically don't change their political views, their religious views, or really anything else. They kind of get stuck. Young people are willing to listen, willing to change, are more malleable in how they think about the world. That's where most of the work is happening, is in that age. You guys have this one? Probably not. How about... I'm doing this in the workshop. I'm going to skip all this. Oh, look at this. Ooh, this is so good and so important. Oh my gosh. This is my pick for religion story of last year, religion data story of last year. Are men more religious than women? They have been for almost all of human history, as far back as we have data. Women are more likely to go to church than men are. Women are more likely to identify with religion than men. If you go to any old church, my church is like 90% women at this point. It's like me, the sound guy, and 10 women. That's my church. You go to any older church in America, the tilt is like 65% women in a lot of these churches. But look what's happening now with the youngest men and these are youngest adults. This is birth year across the bottom. Check this out. So men were more likely to be nuns all the way through. People born in the 1950s, the 1960s, and 1970s, all different, right? Men are more likely to be nuns. Look what's happened amongst men born after 1990 and women born after 1990. Amongst that generation, people born after 1990, women for the first time in history are more likely to be nuns than men are. And that is terrifying. And the question is why? Don't know. I think one of it is a lot of Christianity became like masculine Christianity, like the Mark Driscoll style of like God wants to like kill people and UFC fighting and all that kind of stuff. And that turned a lot of women off to faith, and they walked away. So now we're seeing for the first time ever, we're seeing women be more likely to be nuns than men are. That's something to really keep in mind going forward. If that continues, ooh, baby, the church is in a lot of trouble. Because most older churches, women are carrying the load. Even in not older churches, women are carrying the load. That's something we had to keep in mind going forward. Race, 23% of white people were nuns in 2008. Now it's 36%. The least likely racial group to be a nun today are Hispanics. 1 in 3 Hispanics are nuns, which is the lowest of any racial group in America today. Notice the black rate jumped from 20 to 36, the biggest jump over the last 13 years. Something we need to talk about a lot is the black community is losing people from religion faster than the white community. What's also interesting is when they leave, they don't become atheist agnostics, they become nothing in particular. They don't go all the way to that far edge. That word carries a lot of negative weight in every community, but especially in the black community, atheist agnostic. So, that's where I was talking to you about the Democrats. This up here, 50% of white Democrats are nuns now. Amongst black Democrats, it's 33%. Amongst Hispanic Democrats, it's 33%. Amongst Asian Democrats, it's 45%. White Democrats are leaving the church in absolute droves. Okay, now let's talk about those 3 different categories I've been mentioning a lot. Atheists, agnostics, and nothing in particular. They are not the same thing. Okay? I think it's really silly that we have like 3 different kinds of Protestants, and for almost all of human history, we've had one kind of nun. You're just a nun. If everyone said, oh, all Protestants are the same, you would go, no, they're not. That's silly. But we've done that with the non-religious for a long time. We didn't categorize them for a long time, and we need to. There are 3 different categories. Okay, so here's the rise of the nuns over time. Atheists are 7% of our population today. Agnostics are 6% of our population today. Nothing in particulars are 24% of our population today. Okay? Notice where almost all the growth is here. Nothing in particular, 15% to 24%. That's 9% of the population. You know how many people that is? A lot. 330 million adults. 30 million people became nothing in particular over the last 13 years. That's a lot of people. Atheist agnostics are growing, but not nearly at the rate of the nothing in particular. It's 15% to 24%. So, we'll skip that. You guys know the most hated group in America today is atheists? We asked people on surveys to put this group on a scale between 0 and 100, meaning 0 being very cold and 100 being very warm, and 50 being neutral. In 2012, the average American put atheists at 34 on a scale from 0 to 100, which was higher than Congress. Or less, you don't mean less than Congress. You know what I mean. Congress was like 43. It's crazy. People, if we ask, my favorite way we ask this question is, would you be mad if your son or daughter married blank? You know what I mean? It was like someone from a different political party or someone from a different race. Atheists always score the worst on those. Always. They're the most, stigmatized group in American society today. So to be an atheist means you got to really be an atheist. You don't like, well, I'm an atheist. You're proud of being an atheist because you embrace everything good and bad and indifferent about that. Look at this. This is how different atheists are from other types of, from nothing in particulars specifically. 51% of atheists have a bachelor's degree, okay? 51% of atheists have a bachelor's degree. Only 25% of nothing in particulars have a bachelor's degree, okay? When we're talking about the nuns, that's what I mean by how different they are. 51% versus 25% have a bachelor's degree. Nothing in particulars are one of the least educated groups in America today, and atheists are one of the most educated religious groups in America today. They're living in different worlds. Most nuns, by the way, are not atheist agnostics. They're nothing in particular. 3 in 5 nuns are nothing in particular. 3 in 5. And so when I say nuns, everyone goes, oh, atheists. No, that is not the modal atheist. That's not the modal nun. And look at this. This is a share with a bachelor's degree in 2008 versus 2021. 25% of nothing in particulars have a bachelor's degree today, up from 16%. But look how much atheists have gained. 18% gain in those of the bachelor. They're gaining huge in American society. Nothing in particulars are where the public was 15 years ago when it comes to education. They're behind like 15 years economically and educationally. They are not doing well in American society. And this is income distribution. You might have that slide, I think. You should. I should have my own handout. That'd probably be a lot better, wouldn't it? Oh, right there. There it is. Good. I'm back on track. Good. Look at this. 60% of nothing in particulars make less than $50,000 a year. That means that most nothing in particulars live in poverty. Okay? 13% of nothing in particulars make more than $100,000 a year. Compare those to atheists. 40% of atheists make less than $50,000, and 29% of atheists make more than $100,000. You see the picture that's starting to emerge here? A group that is struggling financially, struggling educationally. Struggling is the key word. Atheist agnostics are not struggling. Sociologically, I think atheist agnostics are doing quite well, thank you. They're doing fine. They got education, they got income, they're doing what they should be doing. Nothing in particulars are not doing those things. And here's where the rubber meets the road. This is the share of people of each tradition that make less than $50,000 a year and have a high school degree and no more education. 32% of nothing in particulars are in that category. Look at what it is amongst atheists, 12%. I consider these people the ones that are lost. Economically lost, educationally lost, socially lost, spiritually lost. They are lost, and they're growing. Right? This is a third of 24% of the population. This is 8% of America we're talking about right now. And I would never write this in a paper, but if you want to talk about those people who shoot up buildings and stuff, I'm just saying, what leads to those kind of behaviors? People feel hopeless, helpless, left behind, left out, disaffected, disenchanted, and that looks a lot like that group, if you ask me. You know, they're just struggling. They're swimming in social space. I'll skip that. Let's see. That's about voting. You guys don't care about that, do you? No. This is interesting. This is the percent engaging in a bunch of different political activities. So things like putting up a yard sign, going to a local meeting, supporting a candidate or campaign. Look at this. In 2020, this is a crazy number, half of atheists gave money to a candidate or campaign. Half. You know what it was for white evangelicals? 25%. Atheists are the most politically engaged group in America today. And guess who's not engaged? Nothing in particular. Nothing in particular. They don't even do basic stuff like put up a yard sign. 5% attend a political meeting. That's half the rate of atheists. 7% attended a protest or march. 18% of atheists did the same thing. 22% donated money. It was 50% of atheists. You see this on every single measure. They are not engaging in the political process either, which for any political scientist makes all the alarm bells go off in the entire world. Because if you're not engaged, that's basically telling us you don't think politics works for you anymore. That's a bad scenario. Democracy works because we believe in it. And if we stop believing in it, it stops working. You know? It's a scary time. Are we almost done? I got 5 minutes? Oh, Larry, come on. We got to go. Okay, here we go. Get to the good stuff. It's all good stuff, isn't it? Thank you. I needed that right now. 84% of nothing in particulars attend church never or seldom, which means that 16% attend more than never or seldom. So they're not completely turned off to religion. Okay, 16% go at least once a year. For atheists, it's less than 3%. So they're not anti-religion. But look at this. The question is, how important is religion to you? 32% of nothing in particular say religion is at least somewhat important to them. 1 in 3 of them say religion is at least somewhat important. Amongst atheists, it's like none. It's a rounding error. Amongst agnostics, it's like 5%. Amongst nothing in particular, it's a third of them. By the way, this is a third of 24% of the population. This is a big hunk of people we're talking about here. So, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is a survey where we asked the same people the same questions. In 2011, and then again in 2020. Okay? So let me just knock through this real quick. Amongst atheists, almost 80% of them were atheists 4 years later. They don't switch. Okay? Amongst agnostics, 53% were agnostic, and 22% were nothing in particular, and 16% were atheists. So 6% of agnostics became Christians. Look what it was amongst atheists, 1%. But look what it is along the top row here. Amongst nothing in particulars, 15% of them became Christians 9 years later. That's 15% of 24% of the population. That's a whole lot of people. Millions of them. They are not anti-religion. I wrote a piece called, "We Should Stop Debating Atheists," and that's why. Not a whole lot of point in that. They're not coming back. A lot of nothing in particulars are willing to come back. This is what I think American religion looks like. 64% of Americans are religion, generally seen over here. 23% are nothing in particular. 6% are agnostic, and 7% are atheists. I think nothing in particular is the way station between this and that. Hardly anyone goes from being a hardcore Southern Baptist to an atheist, or vice versa. They almost always go through a transition period in the middle, and that's nothing in particular. That is where the battle for America's future, religious future, lies, is in that category right there, that nothing in particular category. Which, I will remind you, 1 in 3 young people say that's their category. That's where the battle is to be fought. Right there. Not with atheists, agnostics, but with nothing in particular. So, a couple takeaways. If there are 60 million nuns in America, that means there are 60 million stories. I've heard a lot of them over the last year and a half. Right? I look at spreadsheets, but spreadsheets represent people. And every person, as far as I can tell, is born in the image and likeness of God. And so it's easy to look at people and generalize them, but you also need to talk to them. Some people left religion because they moved the service time up half an hour on Sunday morning. They didn't want to get up. And then some people left religion because they were gay. You know what I mean? Some people leave religion for very trivial, kind of silly, stupid reasons, and some leave for very, very good reasons. We can't lump them all together. You know, we can't lump them all together. Everyone got there by their own path. Pastors, stop being partisan, please. Michael Jordan was asked one time, why is he not more political? And he goes, because Republicans buy sneakers too. You get my point? Democrats deserve Jesus. Republicans deserve Jesus. Even those nutty Green Party people deserve Jesus. They all do. They all do. So I'll end with a story. You guys know the parable of the sower. You're aware of this story before? My church is a little church, American Baptist Church in Southern Illinois. We have about 12 people on a good Sunday now. For the last 10 or 15 years, we have been doing a Brown Bag Friday program. We pack up a brown bag of food with 13 items in it to give to our kids in our local public schools. Our county has 84% of kids in my kids' school are on free or reduced lunch. It's one of the poorest counties in the state. And so we pack a bag of 13 items like Pop-Tarts and fruit snacks and a Capri Sun and a water and stuff like that. It gets them through the weekend because we were being told that some kids were literally not eating at all from Friday afternoon until Monday morning. And I thought, well, we can't let that happen. And so we started with 30 bags, thinking maybe we'll do 30 bags. And then the money never stopped. We've never, ever had to worry about funds in the history of the program. It's been going on for 12 years now. We pack 225 brown sacks of food every weekend for the kids in our community. 1 out of $4 that goes in our offering plate goes to Brown Bag Friday. So 25% of our budget goes to this one program. And in the bag, we pack a little, it's just, all we put is a little piece of paper that says, we're First Baptist Church, we don't know you, but we love you. If you need anything from us, here's our number, call us, and we'll be happy to help you. We've gotten one call in the history of that program in 12 years. And it was a grandmother. She called and she said, you know, I'm taking care of my grandson, which happens a lot. And I can't afford a coat for him. It was getting wintertime, it was October. Can you help? And we just so happened to be doing a rummage sale that weekend. And so we had a fellowship hall full of coats and clothes and toys and everything else. We said, come on down and grab whatever you want. You get to come in before the crowds come in. They came in on Friday night, and the grandma was just so happy and so relieved, and she filled up 3 or 4 big sacks of clothes for that kid, herself and the kid. I didn't get his name, and I didn't get her name, and I don't care what their names are. You know what I care about? That kid, for the rest of his life, is going to know that church who didn't know me loved me. Isn't that it? Like, isn't that the goal of this whole thing? Like, we can talk all we want about programs and outreach and stuff. Our job is to build the kingdom of God. That's it. And as the parable of the sower talks about, it's our job to throw seed. That's our job. That's where our job ends, okay? I think more and more seed is falling on rocky soil. I don't think there's any way to look at the data and say that's not true. The soil is rockier now, but it does not preclude you from continuing to throw as much seed as you possibly can. I hope that kid, when he's 25 years old, sitting at a bar and someone says something mean about religion, goes, no. No. Now, I do hope one day he becomes the next Billy Graham, so I can tell that story about how my church created the next Billy Graham. But even if he's not, even if he's just a guy who does not hate religion because religion gave him a coat, that is all that matters. Our job is to do the kingdom work as long as we can. And whatever else happens, our job is to throw the seed. All right, Q&A. Let's go. Anybody? Oh my, all the way in the back. Had to be back here. Oh. Can we throw it to you? I mean, I could.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about your call to nonpartisanship and how we look at that in terms of issues of discrimination, anti-racism, and how those issues have been kind of co-opted culturally into partisanship.
So I believe that pastors have been so scared of talking about politics, they've stopped talking about politics. I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal. I had to throw that out there. I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal where, I basically showed that pastors are not talking about politics from the pulpit. The data says that, okay? And why? Because they're afraid they're going to divide their congregation. And I think that's actually the worst thing you can do, because then you're ceding the territory to Tucker Carlson and Rachel Maddow. And I don't want either of those people discipling my people in the way of the kingdom, okay? So here's what I propose. We talk about things like, Imago Dei, which says that every human being is born in the image and likeness of God. And that might mean that God cares about the illegal immigrant, but he also cares about the unborn too. That hurt coming out of my mouth right there. But let's be political, but if you give it to one side, I think you should do your level best to give it to the other side. Because I don't think either party now represents what I think the gospel is all about. And I think we need to be clear about that from the pulpit. We need to call both sides out when we see hypocrisy, when we see things that go against the kingdom ethic. And I don't think either party right now is really working for what I think the kingdom should look like. Let's say that. And I think that allows people the space to discuss that. Give them the space. Used to be churches were places where you sit in the late 1980s, if you walked into any church in America, you were just as likely to sit next to a Republican as you were to a Democrat. We didn't hate each other because it's hard to hate Bob. Bob, the guy who fills the baptismal font. I don't like his politics, but Bob's a good dude. We lost that, and that's bad. When churches become echo chambers on either side, the church is worse for it. One of the social values of this institution is you sit next to people you don't like, that look different than you, that think different than you, that vote different than you. Different is not bad. At least my understanding of the kingdom is there's going to be a lot of people up there I don't like. We better get used to them now. And if your church becomes an echo chamber of either politics on either side, I think you're not doing your community a service, you're not doing American democracy a service, and you're not doing the kingdom a service. So I think pastors should talk about politics, but give it to both sides. When you see someone doing something you think is wrong, point it out. But then the next time, be mindful that you did this side this time, so next time you need to go the other way and give the other side some grief. Otherwise, you're just patting people on the head. One of the things I really enjoy about my life is there's been days where I've talked to the Freedom from Religion Foundation in the morning and the Christian Broadcasting in the afternoon. I love that. We need more people. We need more churches willing to go both sides, both aisles, talk to everyone, because we need more of that. All right, I'll stop rambling. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to take the mic. Sorry.
Come on, Larry.
Yeah. So I am going to do a time check because it is 1:58.
Which one? The top one? Evangelicals. Donald Trump was the choice of religiously devout Republicans? Can I tell you about that for a second? Oh my gosh. So there's this myth out there that the people who got Donald Trump through the primary were non-religious Republicans. That is not true. If you look at the data, and I show some data from the primaries, Donald Trump won amongst Republicans who never attended, seldom attended, monthly attended, yearly attended, and weekly attended. The only group he lost with were Republicans who attended more than once a week, which is less than 10% of all Republicans. He beat Ted Cruz amongst weekly attending Republicans. Then, you got after that, though, you got a really scary question, which is why? Because he was anti-immigrant. That's what I think. Because remember, Cruz got hit by Trump in the early rounds because he worked with the Bush administration for a pathway to citizenship for people, and Trump used that as a cudgel in the early part of the primary because he was like, I'm anti-immigrant, and he's pro-immigrant. Even though Cruz has more evangelical bona fides than Trump could ever think about. He speaks evangelical. His dad's an evangelical. He's an evangelical. And yet he lost. And the only thing I can think of is because it has to be him. That's the only thing that divided him. Because, Cruz was anti-abortion and so was Trump. Like all these issues, they were exactly the same. Immigration was really an issue where Trump kind of got out on his own. And that's really what led him, I think, to win the early primaries, which led him to, go all the way.
But is that about race then?
Oh, it's absolutely about race. It's always about race, right? I like to say religion is the most important thing in society. I think race is more important. It's religion times race. They're interactive with each other, and they create these really weird outcomes. Like to be very religious and non-white doesn't necessarily mean you're going to, doesn't mean as much as if you're non-religious. If you're non-religious and white, you're almost always a Democrat. Amongst people of color, it doesn't work that way. Why? Why does it have to be that way? I don't understand that part of it. Which is part of my job is try to understand why that is. What a great job. Man, what a cool career I chose. Totally fell into it, by the way. Luckiest guy on earth. Are we out of time?
We are.
Oh, gosh.
So-
Thanks, everybody.